So when we're learning to improvise, we often learn it in a somewhat controlled environment. And what I mean by that is you learn a pentatonic scale, say it's the major pentatonic or minor pentatonic, and then the context you will use it is oftentimes over like a backing track on YouTube that is suited to that scale, or we know is going to fit that scale. So the people who make these backing tracks make sure that they use what's called diatonic chords. And all that means is they're using chords that all fit to one key. And all these diatonic chords are built from the same scale note. Now you don't need to understand that necessarily, but it just means that you can play that one scale over all those chords and it's going to sound really good. But then we get out into the real world and we might be playing with another guitar player having a jam, or playing in the band situation, or just even playing over some of your favorite songs. And what we find is that when we're playing these songs that we like from other artists, or just a random chord progression you've made up with a mate, is that when we use the scale to improvise like we did over the backing tracks, it might work over some of the chords, but then there's some chords where it starts to sound a bit weird and it doesn't quite fit. And it's confusing because we know the song is in the key of A major, for example, so why isn't my pentatonic scale working? And the reason is, a lot of artists, when they write songs, they're not just using diatonic chords or chords that belong to the key, or even your mate that you're jamming with. They don't necessarily know what chords fit together. They're just playing chord shapes in random places that seems to sound cool for some reason. And what this is doing unintentionally is using something called borrowed chords. So these are chords that are borrowed from different scales or different modes, or they might be modulating for a bar, which just means changing key. And this might be sounding very confusing, and that's because it is. There's a lot of music theory behind this, and it can take ages to learn how to analyze chord progressions properly and know exactly what scale is going to fit with all of them. So when I have students come to me and ask me about what to do in these situations, I want to give them something that's practical and they can use straight away, rather than having to spend 6 months going over chord progression analysis and music theory just so they know how to solo over a couple of chords that might not fit the key when they're jamming. So that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you how to tackle these chords that aren't diatonic, or these borrowed chords, so that when you are jamming in whatever situation it may be, and you can give off the impression that you know what you're doing, which is like 90% of what we try to do as musicians. Now for this video, I'm going to be using the worksheet that I made to go accompany the video where I talk about adding melody inside your chords, because it's actually pretty much the exact same thing. In that video, it was used more to play in the style of Jimi Hendrix and that kind of thing, but we're going to repurpose it for this one. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link in the description, but don't worry, I will still go over it here, so you will be able to understand it even if you don't watch that video. And just before we get into it, I'm going to give you an example of exactly what I'm talking about. Let's say I was playing in the key of A major and I had a 4-bar chord progression. So I had my 1 chord, my 3 chord, and then this chord, this major chord, which doesn't belong, and this random minor chord, which also doesn't belong. Right, so I'll just pause that. So we had 4 chords there. This chord would be my 1 chord, and this would be my 3 chord as a minor. Now these both belong to the key of A major, but this chord here, which would be like the 3 chord as a major, this doesn't belong to the key of A major. Okay, because it would have to be a minor chord to belong. And this chord up here on the 4th fret of the A, like a G sharp minor, this doesn't belong to A major either. So if I were to just play the A major pentatonic over all that, it's going to sound really bad over those last 2 chords. Have a listen. So it sounds fine over here. Now it sounds a bit rough, especially over that. Right? Not the best sound in the world. So we know we can use the A major pentatonic over the first 2 chords, but for those last 2, we're going to have to figure out what we can play over that. And the way we're going to tackle this is for each bar chord shape, we're going to learn a pentatonic shape that matches. Now this first one here, if I'm ever playing over a major bar chord, I can play pattern 2 of the pentatonic scale around it and it's going to work. Right, this would be the green notes. The bar chord is the red notes. Okay, so anytime that there's a major bar chord that doesn't seem to quite fit the key that I'm playing in, I can just find where that bar chord shape is and play pattern 2 of the pentatonic around it to improvise. So let's say I'm in A major and I have my 1 chord, this belongs to the key, my 4 chord, this belongs to key, then I have a weird chord here back to my 1. So in the case of that one, I can use my A major pentatonic scale just like normal over the 1 chord and the 4 chord. But then when it went to this weird chord, now the A major pentatonic scale isn't going to work over that. But I know I can just play pattern 2 of the pentatonic scale around this bar chord shape for that chord, and it's going to fit. Okay, let me show you. So we have the first chord, play the major pentatonic as normal, next chord as well, then I need to change, then back. We'll go around again, so A major pentatonic, A major pentatonic for the next one. Now the weird chord, right? So I changed my scale based on that 1 chord. So anytime there's a major bar chord on the E string, wherever it may be, that doesn't fit the key that you're in, just find the root note of it, or wherever the bar chord's built, and play pattern 2 of the pentatonic around it, and it will fit with your lead guitar playing. Now the next chord shape we'll look at is if there's a major bar chord on the A string that doesn't fit your key, which was actually one of the chords from the example at the beginning. Now over this chord shape, you want to play pattern 5 of the pentatonic scale. That's always going to work around a bar chord that's major on the A string. Again, the red notes being the bar chord and the green notes being the shape, the pentatonic shape. So if I put that in context, I'll play 3 chords that belong to A major, and then I'll play 1 major bar chord on the A string that doesn't belong to A major. It will be a nice weird sounding chord, and I will play pattern 5 of that pentatonic scale around that. So 1 chord, 4 chord, belongs to A major, 3 chord, belongs to A major. Now my weird major bar chord. So we got our 1 chord, 4 chord, and 3 chord. I'm going to use A major over all of those. And then when I get to this chord, which is on the 6th fret of the A string, a major bar chord, I'm going to play pattern 5 of the pentatonic around that. Let's see how it sounds. A major, still A major. Now I'm going to switch back to A major. Still A major. Now here comes the weird chord. Back to A major. So you can hear that I switched my scale on that last chord because it didn't belong to A major. Now the next one is if there's ever a minor bar chord on the E string, pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale is going to fit with that. So no matter where this minor bar chord is on the E string, I can just play my pattern 1 shape and it's going to work really well. So again, I'll do some chords in A major and then play a minor bar chord in a random place, and I'll switch to pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale just for that chord. So we have our 1 chord, 3 chord, all diatonic, all fits, 4 chord, now a random, right, quite a jarring chord there. So the first 3 chords I'm going to be fine with A major pentatonic. But then for that last chord, I played a C minor. I'm going to have to play pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale around that minor bar chord shape. Major. Now I'm going to switch over. Back to my major pentatonic. Minor, pattern 1. So that's how I would play over the weird chord in that chord progression. Now the last chord shape we need to look at is if there's a minor bar chord on the A string. So if we have this chord shape here, I want to play pattern 4 of the pentatonic scale around that. That's always going to work. So again, I'll loop 3 chords that belong to A major, and then I'll put one weird minor bar chord on the A string in there, and I'll play that pattern 4 and it will sound good. So 1, 3, 4. Now the weird chord. So major pentatonic for the first 3. Now I'm going to go to pattern 4 above where that chord was. Back to my A major pentatonic. Pattern 4. Alright, you get the idea. So now we know what pentatonic shape to use for when we do come across these weird chords. Now let's circle back to that chord progression I did at the start of the video and how we would tackle that. So there were 4 chords. There was a major bar chord here, so the key of A, minor bar chord here, but this would be a diatonic chord that belongs to A, and then it changed from minor to major, which wouldn't be diatonic, and then I played a minor bar chord down here. Now the way I would solo over this is I'd use the A major pentatonic for this 1 chord and this 3 chord, but when it switches to this, I'm actually going to change to pattern 5 of the pentatonic scale built around that chord shape, and then when it changes to this one, I'm actually going to switch to this one here, which would be pattern 1 built from that root note of the chord. Okay, so first 2 chords, major pentatonic, and then the 3rd chord, I'm going to switch to pattern 5, and then the last chord, pattern 1, and it should fit. So A major, now I'm going to switch, pattern 5, pattern 1, I'll make it a bit more obvious this time. Now pattern 5, pattern 1. If I tried just using the A major pentatonic over all those, let's have a listen to that. Right? Doesn't sound quite as good. So a really good way to practice this is if you have a looper, play 3 chords that are diatonic or belong to the key, and then add just one really weird chord that doesn't belong to the key, and then play the corresponding scale shape to whatever bar chord shape you have used to play this weird chord. And if you have no idea what diatonic chords are or what chords fit together, I'll leave a link in the description to a video where I go over all that, and there's a PDF available and whatnot for all that too. But hopefully this will help you tackle some of those weird chord changes, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.